Well, hello guys, welcome to the second video of this week number 7. We were talking about reason being emphasized as the highest faculty. Um, so, this is something really characteristic, okay? So, you're going to see that the heroes, the protagonists, let's say, the characters, the main characters in the books, the novels, the poems, everything else from this period, most of their brightest faculties are those being intelligent, being smart, right? And normally dumb people, stupid people, suffer the worst of destinies, right? Like they have a really bad time, or they end up having a lot of complications or a punishment or something like that, right? So that is really important. Now let's talk about classicism over here, right? The classical side of neoclassical in terms of reason. Many of the ideals that they exalted were the Greek ideals, right? So let's think about the Odyssey. Yes, I don't know if you remember that really classical um, Greek tale. Well, it's actually an epic poem by Homer, but well, my point over here is that, well, first of all, many of the characters over there, uh, let's say, belong to the aristocracy. So they were people with a high cultural level, with a lot of money, with let's say some political positions, and they were somehow integral human beings, right? Because they were warriors, and they were, let's say, most of them have really good and developed physical skills. But the most important part, the ones that was most exalted during things like this, was their intelligence, right? The capacity of reasoning. So let me tell you this story about Odysseus or Ulysses. Remember, one is Greek, the other is Roman, but it's the same character somehow. So I don't know if you maybe watch one day an adaptation, a TV movie, or a movie, just that, or well, different things. Do I have my copy of that over here? Let me see if I can show it off to you. Just give me a second. Maybe I can find something to show you over here. Oh yeah, this one. Yeah. I love this movie. Well, it's a TV movie, right? And this is how I almost first of all, when I was a kid, was able to get in contact with the Odyssey. So if you're able to watch it anytime, it's a great way to see it. They changed a lot of things, but it's fun. It's lots of fun to watch it, and you're going to be able to be enlightened and have reason and be very neoclassical, right? Well, I was telling you a story about this guy over here, Odysseus or Ulysses, and well, he arrived into an island, and this island was controlled by Cyclops. Yes, probably you can see the guy over here. Yeah, so there were a lot of these guys who were Cyclops, who were enormous, and they were really really strong. They were giants, and they were anthropophagists, meaning that they were like cannibals, right? That they ate people. Well, they ate anything, including people. So well, he and his crew, because they were traveling on a boat, arriving to this island, and they were captured by one of them that was called Polyphemus, and well, he killed a couple of them. All these guys who always die first in all the adventures. He had like 100 of these guys, because every time that he arrives, they always describe. They always describe that there are 2 or 3 or 5 guys who die. Well, so there were a couple of guys who were devoured by this sort of monster, and then the others were taken to his cave in order to eat later, right? Because, I don't know, apparently these monsters always want to give the heroes a chance to escape, but well. So they took them over there. Of course, they were helpless. They couldn't do anything. These monsters were too strong. They were, of course, good warriors and everything else. And actually, I think myself logically that they could have overpowered the guy. But well, that was not the point, because literature wanted to show how smart they were, right? And especially the hero, right? So what Odysseus did was strapped himself like with some belts under some cattle. Yes, there were I think sheep or cows or something like that, and they strapped, and somehow like hidden in that way, they were able to enter the cave of Polyphemus, of this giant Cyclops, right? Well, I guess that that he's only his one eye, because as you can see, well, Cyclops have only one eye. Well, this eye doesn't give exactly a very good peripheral vision, so he didn't realize that these people entered. They waited for him to fall asleep, and with I think it was like an iron or something like that. He stick that iron, that red hot iron, into his eye. Of course, he was blind. It was his only eye, and well, he sort of woke up in pain, screaming, and asking, "Who did this to me? Who did this to me?" And Odysseus, in order to add insult to injury, says, well, because he says like, "Who are you? What's your name?" And he says, "Nobody. My name is Nobody." And he started like asking like some other questions, like, "Hey, where do you come from?" etc. And the questions were nowhere, nobody all the time, right? So, well, he was able to free like his companions and escape. And when the other Cyclops arrived to assist his brother, they asked him, "Who did this to you?" And he said, "Nobody." And to every question that he asked was nobody. So Odysseus didn't only guaranteed his possibility of escape, but also, let's say, made his name untraceable somehow until that moment. Later on, we will see that all this cocky thing explodes in his face because he is punished for that. But at least until the moment, he seems pretty badass, like outwitting, outsmarting this monster, right? Because this guy was, the monster Polyphemus was really strong and everything else, but he was portrayed as a dumb creature, right? Which in the neoclassical period was the worst of insults, right? Like you could be fat, you could be ugly, but what you couldn't be was stupid, right? I think that should, certain things of the neoclassical should come back these days. So, well, that story is to let you know how in the neoclassical period authors were striving for that kind of literature. This was written, well, it was not even written, right? This was created centuries before in the ancient Greece. So these were the sort of values of that they were trying to rescue over there. Like if you were going to solve a problem, if you were going to sort of have a conflict, normally the way out of it was reason, was intelligence, no the other way around, right? Now, this final characteristic that we have on the slide number 97, I think, yes, talks about writing itself, right? So these are the topics and the themes. Now, but let's talk about the style. Now it says writing should be well structured. So normally we are going to find uh, a writing style that is very neat, very organized, that uses usually very formal questions, very formal words. I'm sorry, very formal vocabulary. A period in which emotion is very controlled. Yes, even um couples that are in love and that some have ended marrying or something like that, they are still very formal. Yes, it's just not passionate love. There's not this sexual love that we will see, for example, in romanticism in the next period. Um, Everything is pretty controlled. Yes, so yes, sure, we love each other, but you don't need to hug. Okay, just relax. Um, and it is always emphasizing qualities like wit. Yes, like being really somehow controlled, and being really smart and cunning. Yes, look for that word if you don't know it. Cunning, Cunning, cunning. So let's say a really good way to understand what I'm trying to say. Well, here we have some really representative works. If you go to the slide number 98, you will find that we have representative works in England and in America, right? So let's discuss a couple of them because we have very interesting cases over there. So let's talk about, for example, Jonathan Swift and Gulliver's Travels. Okay, so I don't know if you have somehow seen any of this before. Maybe a movie, this horrible movie of Jack Black, uh, or any other adaptation, or maybe an animation, or maybe some of you have read the book itself. And this has always been mistakenly classified as children literature, right? Because it has all these fantastic and not very realistic things, such as giants and really small people and horses that speak, and these somehow impossible lands and places, right? Um, so it has mistakenly been classified as let's say, a childhood thing. Nevertheless, Jonathan Swift was really neoclassical, really smart guy, and he was actually making an allegory and a criticism to the politics of the time, to the organization, to some administration, to actually some, let's say, real living people over there that he made a caricature of back in the time, right? So, by means of this sort of parody, he was criticizing different things about royalty, about the distribution of richness, about the let's say, stupid or not very intelligent trends, likes, and preferences of certain people, right? Let's say by the end of the book, he decides that he prefers to hang out with some horses instead of with humans because we tend to be really stupid and things like that, right? So, from the format itself, of the work, there is a parody that actually went under the radar because everybody said, "Okay, yeah, sure, really nice stories for the kids," and they didn't even realize that he was making a critique to these people until it was very late, right? Politicians have always been either too stupid or too smart for our own good, right? So that's Jonathan Swift, for example. We have Daniel Defoe, right, with Robinson Crusoe, which is a really important novel. This is a story about a guy who shipwrecks, like he's on a boat, and because of different reasons, he shipwrecks into an island that was initially thought deserted, right? And that is why this horrible reality show that spent I don't know how many seasons in the TV that was called Expedition Robinson. Well, they took the name from there because it was about some guys living on an island and trying to survive, right? So same thing. This was this guy over there, and he was just somehow lonely on that island, and he had to look for practical ways and smart ways to get his food, to find shelter, to use clothes, to preserve the food once he had it, to escape, let's say, vicious animals, right? You see, it's almost like a man representing reason and logic, taming the wild things, right? Like basically demonstrating or showing that thinking and so how somehow being intelligent is even more powerful than nature itself, right? There's one moment in which he finds an aborigine, a person who was originary of those places, and of course that, I mean, we have to think about the time, yes? I mean, if somebody reads that today, it would find it really, really racist, because of course it was a black man, and I remember very well that in the original language they call him Negro many times, or savage, or wild, or something like that, and basically he sort of civilized him, right? Like tell him certain things about civilization, about habits. This guy, he called him Friday, this aborigine. He taught Friday how to stop eating human flesh because he was originally a cannibal. So you see, let's say this propaganda about how rationalization is much better than let's say these uncontrolled, disorganized ways. He even bring him religion, but religion in a let's say organized way, because Robinson Crusoe was not praying and waiting for let's say food raining from the sky. No, he was praying and acting. Yeah, that was something interesting. That takes us to the case of John Milton and Paradise Lost, which is really important. Let's say Paradise Lost is a retelling of the Genesis of the Bible. Yes, basically tells the story of how the universe was created by God and His angels, and how some of His angels rebelled, and one of them was Satan, and he was thrown out of heaven after some battle. And then he tells the story about Adam and Eve, and how they lived for a while in the paradise, and they were tempted by Satan, and they were expulsed. So this sounds not rational at all. Like how come that we're coming from a period that brands itself rational and somehow based on logic, and we're coming with this magical explanation or let's say justification of the appearance of the earth. Well, the case is really interesting because even though it's basically paraphrasing in its own style, a very beautiful one because it's poetry, is paraphrasing the Bible, he's doing it from a rational point of view. There is a really nice passage in which he examines the motivations of the devil, of Satan somehow, and he finds like the logic behind that. Yes, and I don't know if you are aware, but let's say that Adam and Eve were punished for somehow eating from the tree, the fruit of the tree of knowledge, right? So that was their punishment. That was their sin somehow to eat from there. That was the sin. So there is a good reflection upon this, a good reflection upon the motivation of the rebellion of the angels and all that. Now he never condones that because he's not favoring or saying that Satan it should be worshipped instead. No, not at all. But he's analyzing all this from a logical point of view, which is really nice. And then let's talk about something that's very important over here. Jane Austen it's like probably the first time that we see a novelist that is a woman in all the periods that we have studied. That is not only a protagonist or let's say in the story, but it's a person who writes herself, right? Um, and this is really good. I mean, her literature, personally, I don't find her as attractive. Yes, even though I have like all her works over here in my library because I think that's really important. Well, nowadays it doesn't seem like she's so challenging. Actually, some of her attitudes condone certain behaviors of men. Mm, Nevertheless, back then it was a scandal, right? Like first of all, that there was a woman who was a writer, and then the topics that she managed about independence, about certain things. Let's just think about, for example, Pride and Prejudice, in which we have this girl who is the girl that is supposed to get married, but she doesn't want to. Well, that was a scandal, right? And then there was this guy who was smug and he was full of himself. He was the rich guy, and eventually, after a lot of let's say arguments and bad moments and challenging each other, well, they end up happily living together somehow, reconciling these two things: the pride that she had, and the pride of Elizabeth Bennet, and the prejudice of Mr. Darcy, right? And then we have Sense and Sensibility. That is the story of two girls, yes, two sisters. Um, One that is the parts related to sense. Sense is reason, let's say rationality. So she was uh, really systematic on her ideas. She was sort of cold in her emotions. She always thinks through. Well, that is the sense, and then there is the sensibility of this other sister that is always very emotional. That she acts on impulse. That she acts because of what her heart tells instead of her mind, etc. And the whole book is like an opposition of one thing versus the other, right? What is it more important, rationality or emotion? Yes. And in the end, spoiler alert, basically they decide that we should be like in the middle, right? Like we should act or somehow uh, love intelligently, which I don't know if you have been able to do that. It's a really difficult thing, right? And I don't know if it's decidable. So think about that yourself. Like, is it possible to love intelligently or rationally? Uh, I guess sometimes it is. Most of the times it's not, right? And then to finish, we have over here. Um, well, those are just some of the works in England, and we have the ones in America. And if you take a look at them, you will say, "What? This is like literature." You will find the authors that I think that you must. I mean, these names must ring a bell at least: Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, right? All of them are like the let's say the parents of independence over there, right? They are the guys who were mm, responsible somehow for United States to be what is nowadays, right? Like in an independent country with their mm, autonomous states. Yes. So you will see if you take a look at their works. Yes, instead of novels, instead of tales or poems, that for sure there were some, but the most representative ones in England were these ones over here. Yes, you will see the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and then we have some other publications such as Poor Richard's Almanac or Common Sense, in which there are like reflections about the commonality. Yes, the ideas of being somehow equal, right? So that's something really important. Okay. Uh, well, basically that is the neoclassical period. You will see it's a couple of slides that I have over here in comparison to the other ones, but they are very concrete and very important. Like I actually spent a long time talking about only characteristics and ideas and all these different things. Um, we don't have in this period like an influence of another language, just like we had in the some of the previous ones. English is already more or less stable on this one. Of course, it is going to suffer some changes and, additions, but nothing so dramatic as the inclusion of German or French or Greek or Latin that we have in some of the previous periods. So we will see that starting this period, let's say that the linguistic somehow changes or input is going to cease a little bit. Yes, the English that they spoke back in the neoclassical period is pretty much more elaborate and more consistent and more elegant, if you want to call it that way, than the one that we speak today. But pretty much like we could talk to somebody in the neoclassical period and we could understand that person more or less well, right? Very well, guys. Okay, so let me talk about the assignment of this week. It's going to be only one, and it's this. I am going to send you one of the tests that I have already applied in the past. Yes, like every semester I change the test. I never repeat a test, not for the first or not for the second. So I'm going to send you one of those, and the idea is that you do it at like a workshop, something like that. Yes, so exactly like that, only with different ideas, different texts, different things, is going to be your actual test of the week number 8, right? So I think this is a great opportunity for you to review, to check, and on all these different things. Normally my tests are sort of long, yes, well, not really long, but people think too much sometimes, yes, which is fine, I guess, yes. So I'm going to provide only one assignment for this week, and it will be it. Please, because I guess that when somebody realizes that you have to do this, they're going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to skip the video of neoclassical, I'm going to do directly the test. Don't do that, okay? Because this period is the last one that will be included in the test. So make sure you watch the whole video about neoclassical before you start working on the assignment that will be the test, okay? You can work in groups of up to 5 people, yes, 4, 3, 2, 1, as you prefer, but that will be it, and that will be like the only assignment for this week. The idea is that it helps you to review certain things, to familiarize with the possible things that are going to be present in the test, and well, as I mentioned, practice, so that will be important. Well, that's it, guys. So just please upload the result or the test, well, in this case the assignment, solved in groups. Remember that the original test will be individual, completely individual, no couples, no nothing. So make sure to take a look at your notes. We're going to be evaluating Anglo-Saxon, Middle English, Renaissance, British colonialism, and neoclassical. Okay, so we have all these periods over there, 5 of them, 5 possibilities to make mistakes. So take that into account for classification, because that's definitely a point or two in the quiz, in the test. Take into account all the observations that I have done in the previous session, such as do not limit yourself as language in order to think if it belongs to a period or not. It doesn't matter if the song or the poem or the narrative was written yesterday, it still can be neoclassical or Anglo-Saxon or Middle English. Do not pay attention to the date, but to the style. Okay? So, well, if you require any further assistance or questions or something like that, just let me know. I guess I see you on the synchronic meeting that I think will be on Monday, I guess. But I will discuss it. I will think about it, and I'll talk to Nicholas, who's the representative for the course, and let you know exactly when we're going to have that meeting. Okay? So, thank you very much. Bye-bye.